Sup, faithful viewers and listeners. I am PG Cooper,
And I'm HT Schuyler.
and we're ready for another edition of the PG and HT movie podcast. Perhaps this one will see the light of day. HT, tell the good folks at home what we did tonight.
We did a Sam Raimi marathon. And by Sam Raimi marathon, I mean the Evil Dead trilogy.
Yeah,
Very exciting.
neither of us had ever seen any of them, correct?
Correct, yes.
And with the remake coming out, it felt appropriate to introduce ourselves to the series. And
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, that would be Evil Dead 1, released in 1982. Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, which was released in, 1987? And then Army of Darkness, or I like to call it Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness, which was released in, 1993?
92.
Oh.
It was an interesting trilogy. I guess we'll get to our thoughts on the whole at the end, but I guess we'll start with the film that started the franchise and the career of Sam Raimi, who would go on to direct the Spider-Man trilogy and Oz the Great and Powerful.
And Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah, and that. But Evil Dead 1, you're the horror expert of the two of us. What are your thoughts?
Evil Dead 1 tells the story of a group of friends, where there are 5 of them, I believe.
Yeah.
2 guys, 3 girls, 1 cabin. And they're out, I don't know, on some mountain, and they go to this cabin, and they find an old cellar. They find what's it called? The
Necronomicon.
Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, and some old cassette tapes. And they play the cassette tape, and it speaks this magical code, and then the Evil Dead rises and starts possessing the friends, and then hilarity and fun ensues.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate plot description. I'm sure people I know we use the hilarity ensues a lot as our sort of like joke thing when it's a serious subject matter, but in this case it really is applicable because even though it's a horror film, because of the low budget, there's a certain tongue-in-cheek element to all of them. Less so the first one than the others, but even there it's still present. Thoughts on the movie?
Well, Evil Dead, we were trying to figure out a movie that came out before this that used that whole cabin in the woods idea, and we couldn't really think of one, so, I mean, if people know of it, let us know. And for it being, like, the first one, I thought it was a pretty damn good entry into that whole subgenre, and I do think it's very flawed. I don't think the acting is good at all, but the effects and direction, I think, are excellent. And I don't know. I really admire it. I think it's a great little horror film. It's a little indie film that made on a very low budget, and it just exploded and had this huge cult following. And just look at where the people, well, not the people involved, but like look at where Raimi and
yeah, look where a few of the people involved are now.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that's great. It reminds me of Night of the Living Dead and what's the other one? Night of the Living Dead.
Cabin Fever.
Cabin Fever.
not that it's a horror film, but another like low budget film that could with Clerks. It's not horror, but it's in a similar vein.
Yeah, just that little independent film that just really just blew everyone's mind. And yeah, I mean, even Last House on the Left to a certain degree, except I don't know, no one really liked that movie.
Fuck that movie. It sucks.
I don't think people even still like that movie, but anyway, no, it I don't know. It's kind of hard to judge a movie like this because like you can't judge it like a real film because you have to take into consideration the budget, the time it was made, what they were working with. And I mean, do some of the effects look lame for the time? Were there better effects at movies that came around then? Yeah, for sure. But what it did, I thought it did damn well. I don't think it's that scary of a film, but that's just me personally, and I've been desensitized to pretty much everything. But I could easily see how someone could find it scary. I thought there were a lot of very tense moments, a lot of great imagery, and a lot of just really just fucked up stuff going on. And I think that just all combines to make a pretty solid horror film.
Mm-hmm. I've looked at this basically in the last few weeks. I haven't planned this, but I've watched a lot of great directors' first films, and when they, especially first films when they didn't have much money and resources to work with. I've seen Martin Scorsese's Who's That Knocking at My Door, Akira Kurosawa's Sanshiro Sagata, and the Coen brothers' Blood Simple. And so Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead was another one of those. First film, not a lot of money, and it was basically, I didn't mean to compare it to those films, but it's sort of hard not to think about it because It's very similar in some aspects. And on that level, I think the movie is at its best when it's showing off Raimi's skills because there's a lot of interesting things he does with the film. With just a lot of the practical effects. I mean, they're not exactly all that impressive given the budget, but when you consider what he's doing with what he has, it is pretty inspiring and creative. And I also think a lot of the camera angles are really fun and interesting and help create an atmosphere of tension. I think the first half of the movie is actually pretty dull because there's not a lot happening, and you're mostly with the characters who are just as bland as could be. But in the second half, when things really start to pick up, I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Uh, yeah, I mean, as far as how it compares to those other directors' first films, it's more or less in line with I don't think it's as stuff like Senshiro Sagata and Who's That Knocking on My Door are very, they're not deep per se, but there's a lot of thematic ideas running through and things that you can trace to the rest of those directors' career. I don't think Evil Dead really has that. There's nothing to it that's like, you can point to me like it's really about this, like Who's That Knocking on My Door is really about Catholic guilt. The Evil Dead has nothing like that going on in it, but you can.
You never know. Maybe it's like some hidden message for
that's true.
Some war going on at the time or something. You never know.
Possibly. But for what it is, it's a pretty effectively well-made film, for the most part. Like I said, I think the first half is a bit dull, but once it picks up, it's pretty entertaining. So,
what I found really entertaining was, the first half is kind of dull, but there are some golden lines of dialogue spoken by these people. And just the way they deliver them. I'm trying to think of a few examples.
One moment I found really funny is when Bruce Campbell is he's like helping unpack the car, and they keep throwing objects to him, and like the first two he catches, and he's just like, hey, hey, and the third one they throw at his stomach, and he's like, whee, and it hits him, and I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, Bruce Campbell, we obviously knew he was going to go on to become this big action star in the later films. The people watching at the time didn't know that, but you really can't tell when watching. It's sort of like a wimpy little nerdy character, not that many defining traits, not even that interesting, and it's not even till the tail end of the film that he even becomes the main character.
And even then, he's still, it mostly just feels like that's who it fell upon. It's interesting though too, of the two, of all the characters, the most interesting one isn't really him, it's the blonde guy who's kind of an asshole. Not that he's like super interesting, but he probably has the most personality of anyone in the group because he's an asshole.
I guess so. He has some defining characteristics.
Yeah, being an asshole. It's not exactly like, don't get me wrong, this isn't a Marlon Brando-esque performance of sheer skill, but he had more, not to mention, but he had more personality and more life to him than most of the other characters who were just kind of there.
What ended up happening to his character? I don't even remember. I remember he went out.
Can't spoil it for the people.
Oh, well,
the movie only came out 30 years ago.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But he goes out to try and find like a path because like the bridge fell down.
Well, when they were driving across it started breaking, so they couldn't trust it.
The bridge broke. So he leaves. 2 minutes later, he comes back, and suddenly he's possessed. Mm-hmm. I think he attacks Ash.
He ends up becoming a zombie, I think. Well, not a zombie, but
whatever it is, they're possessed.
The Evil Dead
thing. Yeah, he becomes an Evil Dead. But I totally forget what happens to him. See, that's the thing. While the movie does have a lot of really cool moments, and when you're watching it, you're constantly enjoying it. I don't know, none of the imagery really stuck to me as much as I thought it would. And while watching it, I was like, wow, that is damn cool. But, like, thinking about it after, I can't... there's the infamous tree scene that, those who've seen it know what I'm talking about, which was... It was pretty damn well done. I'm not encouraging tree sexual assault in any way, but, I thought...
It's never funny.
Yeah, I thought for what it's worth, they did a very good job, and it looks very good. The practical effects are phenomenal, in my opinion.
Well, for what they had, yeah.
I'm sure they could have done better if they had a bigger budget, but...
I think I was most impressed with near the end when they, the faces of the zombie, like, I don't want to keep calling them zombies, but that's more or less what they are, is when they're sort of, like, melting, and there's, like, cockroaches and stuff crawling around them and stuff. I thought that stuff was actually really effective, and... I don't know if it'll stick with me per se, but it's one of the images that I remember.
Yeah, I really praise the sound editing, like the voices of the Evil Dead when they were like speaking and stuff.
They were creepy.
Yeah, it was very creepy. It was very chilling. They'd be like singing their little slow melodic songs, and then there would be the really deep demonic voices, and yeah, it would be very effective.
Yeah.
Like I could easily see this really scaring someone. I mean, I'm not really the right person to watch a movie and judge it on scariness levels because I've seen way too much shit, but in movies. But it just to clarify.
Yeah.
But
And the juggles and nom.
yeah, but no, it's it's a very fun movie. It makes a great late night watch. Like I would, I don't know, I'd put it up there with something like Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead or just one of those kind of like fun horror movies to watch with friends. You know. Yeah.
What do you think you'd give it on you grade out of 10? What do you think you'd give it?
Oh, see, that's the difficult part. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's an amazing film, and I don't think it's high art. But I always am more lenient to horror films, especially older ones that really tried and really worked with what they could. And I think the direction and the special effects are like a 10 out of 10, right? They're just for what they had and what they did. Like the ambition is just off the charts. But I don't know, the dullness and the acting and just some slow moments here and there, and it kind of brought it down a bit, but I don't know, I really enjoyed this film more than I thought I would, and I'm really debating between a 7.5 and an 8 right now. I mean, I know that the 0.5 really doesn't make much of a difference, but
Every point counts, my friend.
yeah, it just, I really don't know, it just, I don't know, here, you give your rating and I'll think about it.
C+, which probably sounds cruel, but to put this into perspective, Martin Scorsese, who was maybe the greatest film director still living, his first film I give a C+. So bear that in mind. But anyway, I think the direction is really interesting. Raimi, the way he frames his shots and the effects that he's able to pull off are pretty impressive given what he has to work with. At the same time, when your movie is under an hour and a half and it still feels slow, and still feels like it drags, that's a pretty big problem. Like if your movie's 3 hours, I can be like, well, it is 3 hours, but at an hour and a half, it should go by, reasonably quickly. But and that topped on with characters who are pretty uninteresting and pretty dull, and then just the fact that while I don't mind the story, it is very, very, very simplistic to the point where and not just that it's simple, but nothing much really happens. They go to a cabin and then they get attacked by creatures, and then that's it. I mean, there's just not enough to it in its storytelling to really elevate it higher. So C+.
I don't know, the practical effects, the makeup effects, I really dug the simplicity of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me that's what an effective horror movie should be. It should be simple. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love really complicated, twisted ones like The Shining and such, but I really like just really simple horror tales, and this is definitely one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an iconic film, and I really respect the hell out of it.
Who would have thought The Evil Dead would give you this much of a conundrum?
I know, it's bizarre. And I'm trying to think of other horror movie directors' first films. And, normally horror movie directors, their first film, while they may go on to do better, they're normally their most ambitious because, they're really putting everything they've got into it, trying to get some attention. And I think this one really does it. I mean, Sam Raimi set out to make the ultimate experience in grueling terror or something like that. And while it may not be the ultimate experience, for the time, it probably was. And I think it succeeded greatly on that. Actually, no, I'd say Texas Chainsaw probably beats it, but
I'd say Night of the Living Dead beats it.
Yeah.
And Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, 7.5. Okay, I'll go with that. You've convinced me.
Okay.
But I don't want that to seem like I don't really like the film.
That's a good score.
Yeah, I don't quite love it, but I really, really do like it, and I really, really admire and respect it.
right, so Evil Dead 2, and this is a film that I think both of us had hyped up a lot because this is one of those films that's most people who have seen it love it, like
Yeah,
passionately.
everybody and their fucked up uncle love this movie and have been praising the hell out of it. And a lot of people can't believe that I hadn't seen it, being such a horror fan that I am. They're like, oh, Evil Dead 2, that's like the greatest, I guess, zombie movie, as some people consider a zombie of all time, or it's the greatest
Right.
horror movie. And some people really see it as high art.
Mr. Schuyler, tell the people what it's about.
What about? Evil Dead 2 is not about anything.
I'll try to give a plot synopsis then. Basically, it pretty much ignores the events of the first film, it retcons it to instead of 5 teenagers or young adults, I guess, go up. It's just Ash and his girlfriend, and then his girlfriend dies, but he survives. But he's still stuck in the cabin, and he continues to fight off the Evil Dead while a young girl is trying to get to the cabin because she thinks her father's there who's studying the Necronomicon, and she brings another group of people. And for all the hype it has, it doesn't live up to it. Yet that said, I like this film more than the first one.
I don't think I've been this disappointed since The Dark Knight Rises, actually,
Oh, wow.
with the film, and that's a bizarre comparison to do.
That's another discussion for another day.
Yeah, well, and again, that doesn't mean that the two are bad films. I just think they were hyped. Well, not hyped. Dark Knight Rises wasn't really hyped up, but like I don't think they were as good as either I made it out to be or other people made it out to be, and I don't know. I felt just kind of let down by this film, only because everyone was going on. It's like crazy, fun, hilarious thrill ride and all that, and you're watching it, and for the most part, I was just waiting for something to happen. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some awesome scenes, like when his hand attacks him and he has to cut it off, and attaches a chainsaw to his arm and all that kind of stuff, and that's really, really great. But I don't know. I felt that more so than the first one in a way. I was kind of bored and just waiting for something to happen. And the whole subplot with this girl trying to find her father, I couldn't give any less of shits about. Like, it really doesn't matter. And, she's accompanied with people who were only there so they could turn into the Evil Dead and then get killed. Ash loses his goddamn mind in this movie, and most of it is just the Bruce Campbell show as he just flips out and just mugs at the camera a lot, which is fine, but just I don't know. It didn't make me really like the character. It just made me think, damn, this guy's having a mental breakdown. And I don't know. I felt this was a case where Sam Raimi was just pestered by his fans to go make a sequel, and eventually he was like, "Fuck it, fine, okay, I will." And then he went and did it, and then it just I don't know. I felt he didn't really know what to do, and he was trying so hard to top the second one, the first one, but he didn't need to. He just needed to make a sequel, and this isn't really a sequel. In a way, it's almost like a remake, and I found that really, really annoying in a way. Like Raimi's great direction is still there, and it's really, really well made. The special effects are still excellent. The acting's even a bit better this time. But something about it just, I don't know, didn't sit too well with me. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think it's a bad film by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think it was as good as the first one. And I didn't think it was that funny, to be honest. I mean, there were a few scenes where you're kind of chuckling at the absurdity of it, but no, like, gut-busting, laugh-out-loud moments, but
it's interesting you brought up the subplot about the girl trying to get back to her father and her merry band of misfits she brings along. That's actually one of the elements I liked about it, more so than the first film, is that it was a little, because it's still a very simple story, but it was a little thing that made it a bit more, it gave it more of something that was happening, whereas like the first one is like, they get to the cabin, and then stuff starts happening to them, but in this one, he's at the cabin, and stuff's happening to him, but there's another group that's coming, and I think that it gave the movie more to do, and I found that engaging, and as far as
once they get there, nothing really happens, though.
Well, then,
and they get there so quickly. I mean, there's a few scenes where they're trying to go there, and then next thing you know, they're there.
Yeah, fair enough. It worked for me, and I mean, it's not like an amazing subplot. I just thought, like, I remember watching and like consciously acknowledging, like, I like that they're doing this and making the story not necessarily more complex, but they're giving it a bit more, and I thought that was a good touch. As far as I think the main reason I like this more is probably because Bruce Campbell is really getting to unleash his to do what he does best, which yes is to mug and to chew scenery, but it works especially for a movie that is this over the top. And I loved watching him just go crazy. It's interesting you talk about the movie just being you're waiting for something to happen. I found that it was a movie where it was like things were constantly happening, which was both a pro and a con. It's a pro in that, unlike Evil Dead 1, where there were like the first half where I was sort of bored, I was constantly being engaged by the film, which I liked. There was lots of stuff happening. There was like a lot of crazy moments, but at the same time, and this is kind of weird, but it is at points almost too crazy. Like it's always being throwing craziness at you, but at the same time, the crazy moments are never like it never hit the highs I was expecting it to, both in how crazy the horror would be and the humor. And I mean, you and I kept comparing it to Peter Jackson's Dead Alive or Brain Dead, depending on what part of the world you live in, which is a great movie and I think is better than Evil Dead 2. But that movie has moments that are much bigger as far as like horror and gruesome and violence, much bigger in humor, but also has smaller character moments that help let the movie breathe. So I guess all that to say, it's Evil Dead 2 being bigger and crazier is a pro in a lot of ways, but it's also a con.
Yeah, comparing it to Brain Dead or Dead Alive, whatever. Like I think that's an excellent film. It's one of my all-time favorite zombie films, just horror films in general, in a way, if you want to call it a horror film. Mm-hmm. And that film was so much fun, and I was just like having a blast from start to finish. Like I watched it with a friend of mine. We just had a great time watching it, you know. But in here, I don't know. Like you and I were both just sort of sitting there, just kind of like, huh,
mm-hmm.
like.
Yeah, I definitely had a few chuckles now and then, but I'm also kind of like I laugh a lot at like stupid shit. So,
but like that's the thing, it didn't go full retard in a way.
Yeah,
it didn't do anything where I was like, what? That's so absurd. I'm gonna laugh, which was I don't know. I didn't really find that.
Yeah.
I again, it's not bad at all. I don't know. I felt a little let down by it.
And I think part of it too is just the sheer hype because so many people. Like I really thought.
Yeah, Evil Dead fans need to calm down a bit.
And also the fact that like people, there seemed to be this impression. Maybe this is just what I assumed based on how people spoke about it. But it's like, yeah, it's low budget, but it's a film that transcends its budgetary confinements, and I don't think it really does. I still liked it, and I liked it more than the first one, but just mostly because of that it does go crazier. It's never dull, and I do like Ash a lot more in this one. So, and also I found like the budget, it's not astronomically higher, but it's high enough that, and I think Raimi had grown as a filmmaker since the first one, that it looks better in a lot of ways. So, and there are some pretty cool shots in here, and yeah, I mean, it's not the Evil Dead 2 I was expecting and hoping for, but I still enjoyed it a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but...
So, what would you give it?
B-.
B-, yeah. Honestly, I mean, and... I know I sounded really let down, but I'm just going to give it a 7. I mean, which is, again, that's not bad. That's just 0.5 less than the first one.
But first one, you didn't go in with any expectations.
Yeah, the first one, I actually, good friend of mine told me that it sucked, actually, and he really didn't like it. He was a huge fan of the second one, and he said the first one was just dull and stupid and just not worth watching. But I was like, it's a horror classic, I should probably watch it anyway. So I went in with pretty low expectations, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised with it. Whereas 2, I went in with the impression that it was going to be like the Citizen Kane of horror comedies, you know, and it's really not. But, you know, that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I guess a lot of people who have seen it maybe haven't seen Brain Dead. And you can tell Peter Jackson is definitely inspired by Evil Dead 2. And in a way, that's great. So, if there wasn't for Evil Dead 2, there wouldn't be a Brain Dead. And I'm not going to say that Brain Dead did it better. I just enjoyed Brain Dead more, or Dead Alive, whatever. I get it.
Yep, so did I.
Yeah.
So do you want?
But again, that's not the film's fault though. That's not Evil Dead 2's fault for not being as good as the movie that came out like
5 years later.
5 years later, yeah, like that's not.
Yeah, Brain Dead was the same year as segue into the next film, Army of Darkness.
Seriously?
Yeah, 92.
Oh wow.
Also same year as Malcolm X, as long as we're. You know.
The 3 should be sold together in a trilogy pack.
Like yeah, I'd buy that pack, and then I might, you know, actually no, I'd just buy Malcolm X on its own, but Anyway, Army of Darkness. So you want to tell the people what this one is about?
I just realized that each movie, the plot synopsis spoils the last movie. In the second one, Ash is the sole survivor. The first one, okay, spoiler, everyone dies. The third one, he gets sucked in a wormhole and is stuck in medieval times, which happens at the end of the second one. So spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Ash
Sorry,
is,
folks. We'll put a spoiler disclaimer in the description.
Ash is in
the 1300s.
1300s, and I think it was 1200s. He said it was like, oh, it was the 1300s.
Pretty sure it was the 1300s.
Okay, whatever. 1300s.
He says best I can tell him in 13 something or other AD. At the beginning. Yeah, and basically.
Would that be the 1200s?
I don't fucking know. Do I look like
no, that'd be the 12th century. Oh,
yeah. See, don't confuse me.
It's literally like 2:46 in the morning.
Yeah,
like we're I'm fucking anyway. Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness, whatever the fuck. Some wizard guy is like, yo, go get the Necronomicon Pokemon, and go get it and bring it back to us.
Go get Pikachu.
When you go there, you need to speak the "Day the Earth stood still" phrase, and then bring it back, and then we'll send you back to your time. So he goes, he gets the book, some funny stuff happens, I guess, along the way. He comes back, they fight a big battle with a bunch of stop-motion skeletons, and then that's about it.
That's not a plot synopsis, dude. That's everything that happens in the movie.
Well, that's because nothing really happens in the movie, so when you're trying to explain the plot,
yeah, that's when you're talking about, because, like, it almost sounds like a first act. It's like he's supposed to get the Necronomicon, but then something goes wrong. But then, and you're thinking,
nothing really goes wrong though. It still kind of gets.
Yeah, I know, but like the thing is like you think like, oh, that's the setup for like this movie. It's like, no, that's the setup for the climax. Then the movie ends. Yeah.
Well, first of all, the movie is not consistent with the way the second one ends, that's something that really annoys me. Every sequel,
they retcon the ending for the second one.
So inconsistent with the other one, and there's a bunch of little like goofs and continuity errors. But I don't know, like I normally don't like nitpicking at stuff, but they kind of add up and they start to get on your nerves. But anyway, sorry,
There's a lot of isolated elements in Army of Darkness I really like. I love the idea that Ash's job in the real world is working in a convenience store called what is it, S-Mart?
S-Mart.
Yeah, Shop S-Mart. I thought that was really funny.
That's actually hysterical.
I think the final battle at the end is
that was amazing.
Awesome.
That was like Lord of the Rings.
I think that
that was laugh out loud funny. Like,
Ash himself has some great lines. You're only in command of two things right now, Jack and shit, and Jack left town. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff like that. The ending scene was so bizarre, that I found it amusing. But on the whole, the storytelling in this film is pitiful. It's really bad. Like we said, it feels like a first act. There's no character development to anyone, and it just feels so inconsequential, and it goes by, like, watching it, it sort of just, I was just like, this is such a waste of time. I know that sounds like there are things I like about it towards the end and scattered throughout, but on the whole, it's just like...
I didn't find it a waste of time, because I got to enjoy, I mean, the plot is pretty damn bad, the story's bad too, but I found it very enjoyable. In fact, I found it to be that level of crazy that I was hoping Evil Dead 2 would be. And I felt for the third act, I thought it delivered. I thought the skeleton battle and just everything that happened was just so hilarious. And like in the first one, they had a low budget, but they tried really hard to make it look good. Here, they didn't even try to make it look good. Like they were just throwing dummies at Bruce Campbell and he was attacking.
It's amazing that you can tell it has the biggest budget of the three, and yet at the same time, it looks the weakest of the three. Like, you know it's more expensive, but at the same time, the effects are worse.
There's a really weird Bride of Frankenstein scene where, like, little mini versions of Bruce Campbell are going around, like, attacking him and stuff, which I thought was very bizarre. There's a weird scene where he, like, splits in two, which makes no sense. I thought Bruce Campbell needed to calm down just a little bit. Like, he was talking to himself way too much. And I know it's just exposition, but you don't need to have expositional dialogue for a scene that's very, very obvious.
Yeah,
like,
this is not a complicated story. This ain't Inception, folks.
Yeah, like it's not difficult to follow.
It's Army of fucking Darkness. And the other thing, you mentioned the scene with the little Bruce Campbells. That scene to me represented a big problem the movie had, where it basically completely abandoned the horror elements of the first two films and completely embraced comedy, which I really don't have a problem with on its fundamental level, but it wasn't funny. Like, the first two are funnier, well, until the climax, but the final battle's pretty funny. But most of the humor stuff in the beginning, in the first two-thirds, it falls completely on its face.
Yeah, totally. And The thing, Army of Darkness, I wasn't disappointed at all. I wasn't mad. I had no expectations going into it as well. And the first, it's kind of dull for the first half, but then you realize the first half is like 40 minutes, like
Yeah.
not even. So then when it gets to the second bit, which is like the big battle, then it's totally worth it in my opinion, and you're well paid off for your waiting. It doesn't really feel like an Evil Dead movie, but at the same time it does in a weird way.
Right.
Like,
it does in the sense that these movies just seem to just go crazier and crazier. That's probably why I was looking forward to it a lot. Is I'm like, I thought the concept was so bizarre. Like, this character goes back. This of all characters goes back to medieval times and fights the Evil Dead there, and skeleton Ray Harryhausen style fights. I mean, I thought that was cool.
oh yeah, for sure.
And then I don't know. It didn't really deliver. I don't think it's a terrible movie. I don't even think it's bad, but because there's enough stuff in it that I did really enjoy, but I think it's easily the weakest of the three.
Yeah, it's the weakest storytelling wise, but then again, thinking of Evil Dead 2, there's really not much of a story there too. I think it had just as much of a story as 3. It's just the story was simpler, so you didn't have to worry
Yeah,
about it.
that's true.
And it felt like why would you set it in medieval times when you're not even going to really utilize that fact?
Mm-hmm.
And they do in the beginning briefly, where he's kind of showing off his weapons and stuff, but then he doesn't even use them later in the film, so it becomes kind of pointless. And this film felt the tamest out of all of them. Like, I felt that as they went on, they became tamer. Like, in Evil Dead 2, there's a scene where he's cutting someone up and green blood is coming out, and I was like, okay, well, that's just bizarre. And then in this one, like, he shoots someone in the face, and
there's no blood.
Yeah, instead of their head exploding like it should, they just go flying across the forest for no apparent reason.
Yeah. So I guess scores. I'm giving this a C minus.
You know what? I'm giving it the same as Evil Dead 2. I'm giving it
7.
7. Only because that final battle really brought me around. I could see myself just going back just to watch that.
The final battle, yeah.
Like, it was so much fun.
I don't know. I mean,
it almost could have worked as like a short film, just like that battle.
I almost want to give it a higher, but at the same time, I just think about other, movies I've watched and, how I judge things. I'm like, there's really, I can't let storytelling like this slide. Because if I let that slide, I mean, what do I stand for, No, but
this is like Evil Dead Army of Darkness that you're talking about.
I know. Well, like, and I guess that's the other thing is like maybe it's because we watched all 3 back to back in one night, and I was
maybe
sort of
you're not
like,
supposed to do that.
Probably
maybe
not.
you're supposed to only watch them once, like when they come out.
Yeah, once a week
be
maybe, and like because seeing them all together was just sort of like, I just spent 3 hours 3.5 hours watching these movies, and like, I didn't hate any of them, but did they really add that much to my life?
Probably about
like
4 hours. But...
Yeah, I don't know. I think that was.
I think they did. I'm glad I saw them. I've seen
I am
every
too.
Evil Dead
It's
film
very
now,
possible that by the
remake,
time I got to Army of Darkness, I was just sort of burnt out on the series because, I mean, even though they're short, they're also very. I don't want to say they don't have much to offer because that is really kind of cruel. But they don't have. They're very limited, I think, in really. To the point that like watching, 3 to 4 hours worth of it in a short burst really, I don't know. You're getting the same thing basically over and over again.
I respect each film for being different and standing out, and I definitely applaud them for that, and even trying new things. But it almost feels like each sequel is afraid to be like the one before it, and it doesn't need to be. Like, I know Raimi's trying to do something new, which is great, but you still have to acknowledge the events that happened in the first one, otherwise it just throws everything off. And I felt Bruce Campbell's character Ash to be very inconsistent.
Yeah.
Like, in the first one, he's kind of a whimpering little dude who has to kind of step up to the challenge. The second one, he's just a crazy psychopathic maniac. And in this one, he's just a chauvinistic badass. But, like, it doesn't fit with the rest of it. It felt like Bruce Campbell was just like, fuck it, I'll do what I want on this. What do you think of the remake, then? What are your, perhaps, expectations? I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but, like, what are your maybe hopes or...
Well, I will say this. Based on the original series, it's not like... this is a mountain they can climb. They can easily make a film that stands with this trilogy or better, because even though these films have their merits, I don't think any of them come close to being great. I think the best one, like Evil Dead 2 is the only one I'd call good, and that I give a B- to. So it's not like that's a ringing endorsement. I mean, I liked it, but my point is I think this new one could be just as good, if not better.
Yeah. I think they have a chance to do something really... I think like not many remakes. I mean, take advantage of the fact that they can do whatever they want
Mm-hmm.
with the original material. But I think that the remake, like, I think it's gonna try to do something new. It's gonna bring the horror back to the forefront. It's still gonna focus on practical effects, and I'm very excited for it. I think it should be really good. I mean, I know it has Cabin in the Woods to sort of compete with because it just sort of came out, and a lot of people are still coming off the high of that. Um, but I don't know. It'd be good to remind people like kind of where it all started. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I've high hopes for it actually. I'm looking forward to it, and I guess we'll find out next week
Yeah.
when it comes out. Yeah, so that was our thoughts on the Evil Dead trilogy.
Yeah.